Hey YouTube, it's me, Derek DC Phillips, bringing you all things frightful. Now lately I have been on a Southern Gothic kick, and well, I guess there's a fine line between a kick and a way of life, because I am fascinated by all things considered Southern Gothic, mysterious, folkloric, the legend. It's just all so interesting to me. And I think a lot of you feel the same way. So the case that we'll be talking about today is no exception to this kick, to this category. Today, I want to take you back to the early 2000s. We're talking 2002, 2003. And I know this is actually bringing us much closer to contemporary times than several of the cases that I have covered. I think enough time has passed that we can cover the couple of incidents that are extremely similar in a few ways today, respectfully. Now, the early 2000s were not a good time for the funeral business in Georgia. First and foremost, we have the case of the Tri-State Crematory, which made national headlines. Ray Brent Marsh was the proprietor of this family business, the Tri-State Crematory, and he was essentially convicted of hoarding bodies. Now, although an investigation concluded that equipment at the facility was broken, it was still primarily in working order. It was functional. So it took a lot more effort to begin hiding bodies and providing families with fake remains, essentially, than it would have taken just to follow proper protocol. And there's been a lot of speculation about what happened or why someone would choose to stack bodies, essentially. Now, the general consensus is that due to poor ventilation, that Ray Brent Marsh likely suffered from mercury poisoning, which in effect drove him temporarily insane. This is something that happens. That's where, if you go Google things, that's where, the Mad Hatter from Alice in Wonderland, that's where that mythology comes from, or that saying of being mad as a hatter, because in that profession of being a hatter, making hats, dealing with, I guess, curing leathers and things like that, people actually did suffer mercury poisoning. And so that's what was theorized, because Marsh never could really give a motive for what he had done. And he accepted full responsibility. He served a prison sentence. He is out and about today. And so that's that. The grounds today are irrecognizable. The property was pretty much razed. The buildings were demolished because there was just so much negative energy and negative press associated that it was time to just start over. But we're not really here to talk about that case today. It does set sort of a precedent for the case we will cover that did not receive the kind of national attention that the Tri-State Crematory did. I'm going to put a link down in the description to a video by Ask a Mortician, who did a great job of covering the Tri-State Crematory in a really pretty concise way. So I'll link that below. Now, today's video will focus on what was the Warbington Mortuary in Lawrenceville, Georgia. Now, Lawrenceville, Georgia is a suburb in Gwinnett County, which is about 40 minutes outside of the city, the proper city of Atlanta. And Lawrenceville started out as countryside, but it's always been the county seat of Gwinnett. And at the time of this incident, it was populous, malls were being built, and so on, but since then it has continued to grow exponentially. I should know as a Lawrenceville native, and I remember as a kid driving by this mortuary. It's a compact building on the side of a major highway, and I just remember that it always gave off these dark vibes. And even after this incident, the next couple of businesses that occupied this space, because they never seemed to spend too much time there, they left up those thick curtains in the front windows that just scream funeral. And even now, it kind of gives me a chill to think about, because it just seemed so bizarre for them to do that. They obviously changed the signage and all of that, so why not take down the curtains? But anyway, To give you a little bit of history about Warbington Mortuary, there's not a whole lot out there, but from what I can find, it was founded around 1976 by Jordan Lee Warbington Jr. He was fresh out of mortuary school, and it initially served a mission of being able to provide funerary services for low-income, largely low-income families in the area. That's what I've been able to find in news articles. I did reach out to the Gwinnett Historical Society. They don't have much on file either, pretty much just what was already out there. I will say that Warbington is a very prominent name in Lawrenceville history when you Google it. I believe dating back 9-10 generations to an Elamander Warbington, who appears to have been a judge in Lawrenceville way back in the day, in the early 1800s. And so it's a very prominent name. That name pops up throughout history. I'm not sure if there was any overlap in the past between the different strands of Warbington families, but just to give you an idea, that is a name that pops up, and it's a very established name. Now, bringing us up to more contemporary times, again, the early 2000s, we're now in 2003, and Jordan Lee Warbington III, the son of Junior, who founded the establishment of the mortuary, was apparently living in the space and also working the space. So there's a little bit of, I guess, disagreement over what actually happened. I'm going to read an excerpt from court records at the time. Now, this was a case that was eventually decided in 2007, so I'm getting a little bit ahead of myself, but let's dive in. In the light most favorable to the verdict, the record shows that on the night of May 14th, 2003, Kenneth Tate Kane visited Warbington at the mortuary in Lawrenceville. Warbington had been living in a back room of the mortuary, which was owned and operated by his family. That much we knew. That night, Kane was bludgeoned to death in the mortuary's break room. After Kane's murder, Warbington admittedly put Kane's body in a body bag, covered the body with embalming powder to slow decomposition, dragged the body bag into the back room, and concealed it under his bed. Pretty gruesome stuff. Warbington then left the concealed body and went to Florida for a vacation. On May 17th, so 3 days later, Kane's body was found under the bed by Warbington's uncle and father, who then contacted the police. And initially, Warbington III said that he had done this in self-defense, but later on, after he turned himself into police, what I'm reading from actually right now was an appeal, because he alleged that essentially, he wasn't denying that he had committed the crime. He was saying that the way the crime was presented to the jury, essentially there was no room or no speculation allowed that a third party had entered the mortuary. Also, apparently, Warbington's crimes, he had a criminal record of I guess, more petty crimes had been admitted, which, you know, from his point of view, should not have had any bearing because they weren't related at all to the type of crime. He had never murdered anyone. He had never concealed a body before. He claimed that his collection of ceremonial swords should not have been admitted into evidence. Now, again, there was at the time, I suppose, no definitive evidence as to what the weapon was at the time, but Warbington did have a collection of ceremonial swords, and I suppose prosecution alleged that one of those swords was the weapon that had been used to bludgeon the victim over the head. There were some assumptions that were made, and so in these appeals, again, it's not that Warbington was denying responsibility, but he was sort of arguing that there had been no room left for shadow of a doubt, even though evidence, including the ceremonial swords, was circumstantial. Now, even after the trial, even after Warbington III was sent to prison, and even after the closure of the business, the strangeness surrounding this property, and this business did not stop there. So in 2005, the property sort of just sat there, you know, while the trial went on, while the outcome was determined. The location was shut down, but in 2005, remains were actually found in a white box on the property by the building's next owner, who bought the structure. I'm not sure exactly what he did with the business or what kind of business he opened up. But he did find the remains of a child. Now, this is not quite as scandalous as it sounds and as reports were made out at the time. Obviously, a business that was being converted, where a murder had taken place and a body had been hidden, is a bit salacious, or can be. According to an article that I found from the time in the Gwinnett Daily Post, the new owner of the property acknowledged, yeah, this building has got some history. That was a quote. So it is a sad situation, because I suppose the family didn't have the funds to go through with the plans at the time for the funeral, and somehow these remains ended up in limbo. Now, the article that I found did state that state law provides no guidance on what to do with cremated remains if relatives or friends fail to pick them up, although state law at the same time does not allow mortuaries to withhold remains if a customer fails to pay. So it's kind of an awkward space. I'm not sure since 2005 if anything has been updated in terms of law surrounding a situation like this, but just an all-around strange situation. Following all of this bizarre activity, all of this negativity, the family did seem to regroup and open up a new location along with another partner in a neighboring city. Since then, though, the founding father of the mortuary has passed. I believe several key family members who were involved have passed. Jordan Lee Warbington III is active on social media. He is still in prison and actually up for parole, or was at one time. So as of 2021, he actually opened up, or someone opened up on his behalf, a GoFundMe page. He was apparently seeking representation of a new parole attorney who could advocate on his behalf. And so that is still up in the air. I have not seen any more recent updates than that. And again, like I said, he is active on social media. Out of respect for privacy, I won't go into any more detail on that. But, you know, there is still some ambiguity, it seems, around Warbington didn't necessarily deny that he had committed the crime, but he was bringing into question some of the circumstances surrounding the crime. Obviously, there is some speculation about why the victim, Kane, did show up there that night. What happened? Was there an argument? A lot of that, again, is hearsay and rumor, so I won't go into that. It's out there online if you do search. That pretty much brings us up to speed on everything we know about the Warbington mortuary case.